Welcome back to Worldview. Now imagine working in an environment where 535 members of the House and Senate, each having huge staffs, and that's before we factor in committee staffs, all of whom work an insane number of hours. Well, there's likely to be tensions, work issues, and yes, even a few romances. But when that romance crosses the political aisle and Democrat and Republican staffers begin a relationship in a city as divided as Washington, D.C., how is that handled? Rebecca Gale writes the Hill Navigator column, a must-read for Capitol Hill staffers. She's also a contributing editor for Roll Call magazine. Prior to joining Roll Call, Rebecca worked as press secretary and communications director for senators and members of Congress on Capitol Hill. She's also worked on presidential and congressional campaigns, and her short stories appeared in anthologies published by Boxfire Press, and her debut novel, Trying, was published by Boxfire in December of 2012. She joins us today via Skype from Washington, D.C. Rebecca Gale, welcome to Worldview.
Thanks so much for having me.
Rebecca, your Hill Navigator column is a relatively new fixture, but I enjoyed reading about when Democrats and Republicans enter into relationships. How did this column come into being?
Well, Roll Call's audience is primarily Capitol Hill, and we were talking about other ways in which we could connect with Capitol Hill staffers who are our primary readers and members as well. And Capitol Hill is really a community unto itself. Like, as you mentioned, there are a lot of members of Congress. They have staffs of anywhere from 20. In the Senate side, they can be up to 80 people, and they're in small offices. They're very ambitious. They're working very hard. And there comes a lot of drama in having a situation like that. You put a bunch of smart, ambitious kids in a small room together, you're going to get things like those kind of questions in terms of romance, or questions about how you get promoted, or questions about if your office is going to promote you. So we put it out there. We sort of gave a teaser that we were going to do this column. And the response was really great. A lot of people wrote in with these questions that were very specific to Capitol Hill. And because it is such a unique working environment, we really wanted to capitalize on that.
Well, it's good that you touched on more than just office romances. I mean, the Hill is such a divided and suspicious place these days. I mean, I almost don't recognize it when I visit. How poisonous are the relationships between, say, Democratic and Republican staffs? Is it as bad as between their supposed leaders?
Well, I wouldn't think so. I was on the Hill for about 8 years, and I'm not there right now. I'm with the newspaper. But when I was there, staffers can sort of know the difference between work and play. There's softball leagues, there's kickball leagues, there's soccer, and Democrats and Republicans do get together. They play on the same teams. Sometimes they do it by state delegation. They go out afterwards. I mean, there are Democratic bars and Republican bars, but people are pretty good about knowing where work ends, and being a good person, being a good person to be around would begin. So I wouldn't say it's poisonous between staffers. That said, there are exceptions. I mean, there are definitely some offices from the same delegation, two senators who don't work well together, or there's offices who are on different ends of an issue and fighting against one another, and it can get very personal. So I think there is some of that, but a lot of the rancor is more hyped up in the media as opposed to being played out on the staff level.
Well, but in your column, you clearly had one person write in and mention that I believe the supervisor said something to the effect that you've just ruined my life by starting up this relationship with someone from across the aisle. Talk a little bit about how that came about.
Well, that was a question. It was somebody who worked on a campaign. And I
Right.
do think on campaigns, the rancor is probably a little bit higher, because on a
Sure.
campaign, the line between personal life and work life is very blurred. You work long hours, you work your weekends, and you often live where the campaign is taking place. So
Exactly.
I think, and I advise this person in the same way, I think the supervisor had a concern of maybe this information that we're working on, we're spending all of our days trying to protect, this one side of an issue or a person, and you're off fraternizing with the enemy in that sense. So
Right.
I really encourage the person who wrote in to address those concerns with the supervisor directly. Issue his commitment to the cause, his commitment to confidentiality, and then leave it at that. If the supervisor didn't want to hear about the romance, then no more had to be said about it. But I think he did the right thing in disclosing it, because on a campaign, the stakes are a lot higher.
Sure they are. We're talking with Rebecca Gale, who writes the Hill Navigator column for Roll Call magazine here on Worldview with Denis Campbell. Rebecca, Congress seems to do a very good job of protecting themselves from labor and certain employment laws. And your column seems to walk a pretty fine line there. You were advising, I remember in one I read about a supervisor who was being abusive. How do staffers deal with this situation? And while that was the question that got your response, how many others have similar issues on the Hill?
I think on the Hill, because it is such a demanding place to work, there's a constant struggle of, are you appreciated at your job, and how can you make your work-life balance, how can you make it happen in a way that's good for you and for your office? Because members of Congress have very demanding schedules, their staff is expected to as well. But when I was on Capitol Hill, I loved it. I thrived in that sort of environment. I think a lot of staffers do. But sometimes there is a mismatch. Sometimes members, sometimes supervisors, their tempers can get short. It can be a very toxic environment. And when that happens, sometimes it's not the right fit. And a lot of people move offices, and it can be a good thing. You can go from one office and take your experience there and get it to another office and really expand on it. So I really wanted to encourage people that they shouldn't stay in something that's toxic. They shouldn't stay in a place where the supervisor, I think we had one question where somebody said they were being sabotaged. I mean, you shouldn't stay in that environment. But on the other hand, Capitol Hill is not for the thin-skinned. I mean, it's a very tough, hard-working, demanding place, but it can be a very rewarding experience too.
And that's just in the press lobbies.
Yes. But I also want to make sure that people who read the column know that
Sure.
I appreciate the work they're doing, that I understand why they want that job. It's very easy to be dismissive of somebody's a bad situation at work. Like, oh, well, you don't need to put up with that. You should just leave. But that's not so simple. You're on Capitol Hill. You're working in public service.
That's about as helpful as saying get over it.
Exactly. And that's never what I want to tell people. I always want to tell people is recognize the opportunity you have. You're in Washington, D.C., and one of the middle of our democracy. But you have a tough situation to put up with, and if it's not working for you, you should find a different office that will.
Well, what's coming up next for the column itself? We were chatting just before we came on about perhaps a newsletter coming out?
Yes, I am putting together an email system so that we can send it out to people, because I know Roll Call is free and available to anybody, but it's also Hill Navigator comes out once a week, and we're trying to figure out a schedule for recess as well, which is coming up at the end of the month. So all those congressional staffers who are working very hard will hopefully get a bit of a break.
Well, I have to tell you, I hope to see the column much more regularly, because I know the ones who do the real work are the staffers, and they often go so unappreciated, or they live in hiding because their boss does or says something stupid or off script or whatever. So it's a great service you provide, and as I said, I'm a regular reader every day in the newsletter here and this Hill Navigator just jumps out at me.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you for joining us. We've been speaking with Rebecca Gale of Roll Call and Congressional Quarterly. She writes the Hill Navigator column for Roll Call, and she's author of the book Trying, recently published by Boxfire Press. You're watching Worldview with Denis Campbell. Keep it right here.